Hey, I'm Greaser with Dorman Products. I'm here with Lemmy and Nick, and today we're talking about welders. Just about every shop has a welding machine, but whether you're a competent welder or you're relying on someone else to do the welding for you, we've got a few suggestions from our experience that might be helpful in making welding jobs a little less painful around your shop.
All right, so I think the first thing we probably ought to talk about is who, right? The who of this question. Who is responsible for the welder in the shop? Who should be taking point on taking care of the welding machine?
Maybe the younger guy is looking after the welder because it's assumed everyone knows what they're doing. So the more experienced welders can focus on welding.
In the larger shops, right, you're going to have a tool room, right? And whoever's in charge of the tool room is going to be kind of taking care of that. In a shop that's maybe not quite so big as to have a complete tool room, there's usually going to be a shop foreman, I think, who's often ordering all sorts of shop supplies. And I would say personally, welder consumables sort of fall under that umbrella. A shop foreman might not be well versed in welding, right? So that, he might not know exactly what to buy. So that's one where I would say too, like maybe the more experienced welders on the team should be saying, hey, we're getting low on tips. Like, we need 030 tips. We got plenty of 035s or whatever it may be. So there's a bit of a collaborative effort there. And then the other thing I would warn all of you out there who are watching, if you broke something on the welder or you ran something out, you are responsible for stocking the consumable or at least getting something back into the shop, alerting other people that they cannot continue to weld, because the worst thing is when you need the tool and you can't use it. That's horrible.
You probably also need to consider the types of jobs you have coming in, the material you're welding. For instance, if you're TIG welding a bunch of steel, whatever, it's fine. If you're TIG welding a bunch of aluminum, like I know you'd probably want some extra brushes, for instance, trying to clean things up, right? You don't want contamination from your steel jobs coming into your aluminum, etc. Let's pretend I'm the shop manager, right? And you're a TIG guy and you're a MIG guy. Great. Well, when I'm buying gas, I'm going to be buying pure argon, because you can run pure argon through your machine. You're going to need pure argon, whereas you could run a mix. But I think you got to consider both your jobs and your machinery.
How do you guys feel about protection, your PPE, right? Where's that coming from?
The shop is probably going to have some kind of policy for what you should be using, but not in every case. So if a shop is requiring you to have something, then maybe that's a conversation you have before you get started. If I'm required to have this thing, are you providing it for me?
If they're providing things like gloves or helmets, I'm probably gonna wanna bring my own anyway. That's something I don't like to share. It's almost like sharing like earplugs or something, you know what I mean? You kind of wanna, have your own stuff. It's something that your hands are getting in, sweating in. I wouldn't want to be wearing your gloves.
I've definitely worked in places where PPE was maybe a little on the light side. Didn't matter what I was going to wear, and I would encourage anybody out there to wear what makes you feel comfortable, right? You can go above and beyond what is being demanded of you, and probably should.
All right, boys, when's the time to break out the welder? When do we use it?
Special tool is one of my favorite things to grab a welder for, and it can be exactly the shape and size that I want it to be.
Or even in case of special tool that you can buy, but it may not be economical to buy, or you need it right then and there. You don't have time to order, you don't have time to wait, you need to make it. So yeah, tools is a huge time saver. And sometimes there's no other option. Like if you want to repair the frame on your vehicle, on your truck, shameless plug here with Dorman, we make those frame repair kits and you have to weld them in. So I mean, these are scenarios where you need a welder and it's going to save something that would otherwise be, thousands of dollars to replace your frame and a lot of hours in labor where you can just replace a section of frame.
100% agree. And I think also from the shop owner and maybe service writing perspective too, it can help to remember that there's sort of a balance here, right? So, you're gonna be able to take in those jobs that maybe other shops can't or won't take on, but that has to be offset too with making sure that you're getting paid appropriately, and also kind of taking into account the fact that you sort of own that job, right? Like you've had plenty of stuff that you fabricated, and for whatever reason, once you've touched it, right, that's sort of, you own that. And this isn't like going to purchase a new part where there's a warranty and someone else who has sold it. Instead, well, this is, all repairs, sort of fall on a spectrum, and you may own something on that spectrum.
Yeah, that weld is your signature. Another thing that should be considered in almost any shop would be the actual business side of the welding. Your foreman and your service writers should be familiar enough with the process to make intelligent decisions regarding who's doing the welding, when is it getting done, what does it cost.
Your foreman needs to know who's a competent and confident welder, right? Needs to know what kind of equipment you've got in the shop, right? If somebody's trying to, glue a couple pieces of titanium together, but you only have a MIG machine, well, that's probably going to be difficult, if not impossible. So there needs to be a little bit of education and background there, I think. Your writer, I think, also needs to set up some boundaries to the customer, depending on what it is that's being repaired, right? Is this something that's going to be rock solid, just slam some paint on it, you're good to go? Or is this sort of touch and go where it's like, look, we're going to try and save this for you, but you might be back here in 6 or or 8 months.
Yeah.
I think all of those things sort of come into play.
Big takeaway here is communication. You know, having the technician communicate on these jobs and having the, you know, the writer or the foreman communicate to make sure everybody's on the same page with what can and can't be done and what makes sense.
Let's just mention for a moment billing, right? Like where are we at on billing? I got my own thoughts, but you guys take it first.
Typically the way I bill when I'm doing like custom work, it is hourly, you know, so it's usually customers, they just want something specific at whatever it takes. I add in about 10% for consumables, you know, so if I'm doing work for, you know, say $140 an hour, at the end of the job, 10% is going to cover consumables.
Sure, yeah, I would develop a policy on material cost, right? So if you're adding in an appreciable amount of material, right, that's got to be covered, right? I think there's also the cost of sourcing that material, right? If you have to send somebody down to the steel yard, okay, well, somebody's got to pay for that ride. But it's easy to forget some of the smaller stuff, right? Like, you know, how many flap discs did you go through to get to bare bright metal so you can put a bead down? Well, you can't forget to bill for those flap discs. Otherwise, you can get upside down, I feel like, especially on the small jobs, really, really quickly. And then don't forget, too, about like wear and tear on the tooling, right? Like every now and then you have to buy a welder. Let's be honest, that's not cheap. You're going to have to buy, you know, all sorts of things. Your grinding wheel, et cetera, those burn out, or you have to, put fresh brushes in the motor. Like that stuff all sort of adds up. So I think, you know, to your point, you can always kind of overshoot and come back a little bit. But I think giving a customer a good idea of what they're looking at beforehand is usually, you know, good economic sense, but also build a rapport with your customer.
Absolutely.
Alrighty, well, there you have it. A little bit of our insight, I guess, on automotive welding specifically and how it kind of fits into shop life. If you need a little more info, take a little deeper dive into our Shop Press article on this. For Nick and for Andy, I'm Lem. We're out of here.